by the way.
Good afternoon, dear speakers and participants. Good morning, good evening for our audiences from different parts of the world. Greetings from the Arab Federation of Exchanges. I hope you are doing well and welcome to our annual conference and to this interesting panel, IPOs Pipeline for 2021 in Arab markets. My name is Fadi Kanso. I'm the head of research at AFE and the moderator of this panel for the next 45 minutes to tackle four major areas, starting with Saudi and GCC IPOs markets in 2021 and in 2020, to COVID-19 impacts on IPOs markets, and what does it take for private companies or state-owned companies to go public. First of all, let me introduce our dear speakers. Mr. Tariq Fayed is the chairman and CEO of Banque du Caire, with more than 32 years of banking experience in a variety of fields, including but not limited to banking supervision, risk management, corporate and investment banking. Prior to his position, Mr. Fayed spent 10 years working for the CDE. He has overseen several departments, including but not limited to off-site supervision, licensing, and macroprudential supervision. Welcome, Mr. Tariq.
Thank you. Welcome, Fadi.
Mr. Greg Hughes, he's a partner and MENA IPO leader, as well as MENA transaction diligence leader within strategy and transactions at EY. Greg has approximately 20 years of experience in IPO and M&A transaction preparation and execution in the UK, Hong Kong, Mumbai, and the Middle East and North Africa. He has spent the last 10 years working to support companies in MENA with IPO planning and execution on both regional and international exchanges. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you, Fadi. Good to be here.
Thank you. Wasim Khatib is the head of investment banking at NCB Capital with over 10 years of experience in various aspects of investment banking, advising clients operating in the key Saudi sectors. Over the last 3 years, he led his team on the origination and execution of over 32 billion Saudi riyal in investment banking mandates and debt and equity capital markets, mergers and acquisitions, private placements, and real estate. Welcome, Wasim.
It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you, Fadi.
Thank you. And Naif Al-Atal, he's the listing director at the Saudi Stock Exchange Tadawul. His responsibilities include managing the entire listing process across all platforms, equity, debt, ETFs, increasing IPO awareness among family businesses and private companies, and deepening the capital market through various tools. Prior to this, Naif worked at Morgan Stanley as the MENA relationship manager and the head of MSIM Sales Saudi. Welcome, Naif.
Thank you, Fadi. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Well, in fact, 2020 was full of surprises since IPO markets defied all expectations. Globally, IPO volumes grew by 15% year on year in 2020. When it comes to the MENA region, the total number of IPOs in the GCC region specifically declined to 7 issuances compared to 12 in 2019. Saudi Arabia provided leadership for the initial public offering market in the region. 4 out of the 7 IPOs in the GCC were on the Saudi exchange Tadawul. Let me ask Naif, first of all. Let's get the elephant out of the room. Can you tell us more about the Aramco IPO and what it meant for the Saudi capital market?
Of course, thank you very much, Fadi, and thanks to everyone that's listening to the panel. It's a pleasure for me to be here, be part of the Saudi Annual Conference, the AFE Saudi Annual Conference. Aramco was a tremendous effort across the exchange, CMA, central government, and of course, our friends and colleagues from the various advisors and the team, of course, will patch in and tell you more about the journey we've been through. It's been, for us as an exchange, revolutionary. It illustrated many things. It put us on the map as a top 10 stock exchange in the world. We can now say that we host, depending on the day, but we now host the largest company in the world. But I think what stands out for us as an exchange is the fact that we hosted this IPO on a Saudi or a local-based IPO. We've managed to cover the IPO locally. We've illustrated excellence and readiness as an exchange, and I think that's what matters most to us as Saudi Stock Exchange. We've been through a journey of changes as an exchange to accommodate for this IPO, and I think today we're in a very much better place because of the Aramco listing. We pass it on to Wasim to try and maybe tell you more about the insights of this amazing transaction.
Indeed, Naif, thank you very much. Actually, it was a moment of pride for us in Saudi Arabia to host the global energy champion on the stock exchange. It is also a testimony to the depth of the Saudi investor universe and the sophistication of both the regulator, the CMA, as well as the Saudi Stock Exchange Tadawul. What we have also accomplished through this transaction collectively, be it market participants, regulators, policymakers, investors, the rest of the legal due diligence teams, everybody involved in that monumental success story, is that the Saudi Aramco itself demonstrated the resilience through different economic cycles, and we were just extremely honored and proud to demonstrate to the world that the most resilient and the largest company in terms of valuation at the time of listing was hosted here in the kingdom, in Saudi Arabia, on the back of full execution on the ground in 2019.
Perfect. Thank you, Naif. Thank you, Wasim. Well, Wasim, you worked on landmark IPO in Bin Dawood, which is the second largest listing in 2020 with $584 million. Was it any different because of COVID? Can you tell us more about the deal?
Absolutely, Fadi. 2020 was a very unconventional year for any participant in the market. Following the pandemic in March 2020, we had a couple of deals in the pipeline at the time where we were working on Amlak International, which was the first non-banking financial institution to be listed in the Saudi market in July 2020. And then, as you mentioned, Fadi, Bin Dawood completed the listing in October of the same year. At the time, we had certain measures that we had to comply with issued by the government and the Ministry of Health that made it a bit more challenging logistically for us to proceed with an IPO with the standard execution methodologies related to roadshows, meetings, investor pitches, etc. However, thanks to the technology that we have today at hand, be it in Zoom or other book building softwares that we use in these mandates, and full support and understanding from the CMA as a regulator to allow us to proceed with the execution of Amlak and then subsequently Bin Dawood with a new model to be conducted fully through technology and virtually, and supported also by the stock exchange and the different institutional investors that we have in the market who have supported the emergence of these trends in the market, made it extremely enjoyable for us to be innovative in the way we conduct those transactions on the ground. So I'm very happy and proud to say that everybody who was involved in both Amlak and Bin Dawood were pioneers in conducting these IPOs, similar to the international trends that we had seen earlier in 2020, to demonstrate to the market our adaptability, our agility, and also the sophistication and depth of the Saudi market to execute those transactions with full excellence and no compromise on the quality that the market expects from everybody involved.
Thank you, Wasim. Thank you. Naif, what did the Saudi IPO market look like in 2020? Does the IPO pipeline look promising for 2021 and beyond for KSA specifically?
Thank you for the question. I think 2020, despite the handicap, we've fared well. As you said, we've led the IPO league table in the region with 4 IPOs. We've conducted our first ever direct listing in Numu, and we feel like this is a very important milestone, and there is momentum being gathered around the topic of direct listing in Numu. We can definitely see that. 2020 is a year of ETFs as well. We've had 3 ETFs listed in 2020. That's a very nice and solid pickup in the ETF market in the region, or in Saudi, sorry. And we feel like that's all because of the fantastic changes, the crucial changes made by the Capital Market Authority and the exchange towards the ETF framework and the regulations governing ETFs. two very important figures I need to point out in 2020 is one, coverage for IPOs in Saudi. So IPOs were very well covered. The average was around 35 times, and we saw that that trend continue towards transactions that took place in 2021. Another very healthy indicator is the performance of post-listing of these transactions. IPOs averaged a post-listing performance of around 100%, 109% to be very precise. And these two indicators are very healthy signs of a very promising IPO pipeline going forward. With regards to 2021, we've definitely started off the year with a bang. A couple of listings in the main market. We've had a listing take place actually yesterday. We've conducted yet another virtual listing ceremony. And again, with another very important milestone and first closed-ended fund ever being listed on the Saudi Stock Exchange towards the beginning of the year, the Khabir fund. And lastly, we've followed on the momentum of direct listings, and we've actually conducted our second ever direct listing in Numu this year. So we're off to a very good start. And I think, as mentioned by His Excellency, the Chairman of the CMA yesterday in his opening speech, we sit on largest pipeline of IPOs in the history of the Saudi capital market, and that's a very promising sign. We just need to convert that pipeline towards actual listings, and I think we have everything it takes to do that.
Thank you, Naif. Greg, you want to add something when it comes to the region, the IPO pipeline in the region for 2021 and beyond?
Thanks, Fadi. I echo Naif's comments. You know, I've been in the region now for almost 10 years, and I think today is probably one of the most exciting points in terms of the preparation that companies are going through across the region in terms of going public, and in particular in Saudi. In Saudi Arabia, you know, as an advisor, we see a huge amount of activity, companies preparing to go public later this year or beyond. So it's an exciting time, but there's activity around the region, and we're working with, you know, companies of all shapes and sizes across a variety of different sectors, looking to list on the regional exchanges and also internationally. So I hope that this signals an excellent year for the IPO pipeline in this region for 2021 and beyond.
Thank you, Greg. Wasim, what has changed with the regulatory framework? Do you feel being more supportive for more listings in the kingdom, do you think?
Absolutely, Fadi. The regulatory framework has evolved quite tremendously over the last few years. So following the comments that Naif mentioned, new products and services were added to the stock exchange and supported by the regulator that have added more depth and sophistication to the stock market. Now, as we embark on a journey that is built on great momentum, especially built in the last 3 years, where we have seen around 12 listings and with record high coverages of these transactions, be it in the equity capital markets in terms of equity offerings, IPOs, REIT listings, potentially closed-ended funds coming up soon. There was also the introduction of the price stabilization mechanism that has been facilitated and practiced twice on IPOs in 2019. So we continue to see the regulatory framework and the sophistication of the service products to be an attraction point for not only for Saudi investors, but also for international investors and potentially other companies in the region looking to benefit from dual listings in the region where Tadawul may have agreements with them to continue boosting the depth of the market. But it's also interesting to see, Fadi, that when you look at the average daily volumes that have been trading in the stock market since 2019, so I'll just give you some data. In 2019, the average for the year was around $930 million. 2020, if you exclude the SABIC trade with Saudi Aramco, that number went up from 930 million to an average daily volume of around $1.9 billion. And then when you look fast forward to 2020, the average volumes on a daily basis went up to $2.9 billion as of year to date in 2021. So that momentum is going to continue to encourage many issuers to tap into the local market, and the institutional investors, as well as the retail investors, have shown to be receptive to more quality issuances coming into the market.
Thank you, Wasim. Well, despite the COVID-19, the regional IPO market remained active in 2020, as we have said, and issuances picked up in the second half of the year. My question goes to Tariq. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, can we say that the traditional IPO model is evolving, whether in terms of sectors, whether in terms of the traditional IPO, like SPACs, trading listings, to better align with issuer objectives?
Thank you, Fadi. Before maybe I answer your question, maybe I would like to highlight that we as a bank was basically impacted by the IPO, where Bank Jacare was planning to launch its IPO in April 2020, after concluding a very diligent process for almost 6 months. And basically, we have just concluded our early look meetings, and the market sentiment concerning the transaction, the investor appetite, and the overall IPO was really very positive. But unfortunately, with the corona, we didn't manage to conclude the deal, and also the market conditions or the economic conditions in Egypt were very favorable. But unfortunately, we couldn't manage to conclude the deal, and it was the whole program, the whole IPO program in Egypt was put on hold till the market improvement, till we witness a market improvement in the global markets at large. If we're gonna talk about the COVID impact, it basically affected the global economy, the markets, the business and investors. Economic sectors have been hit hard by disruptions, high level of uncertainty, and the exponential spread of the coronavirus. The majority of business focus has been on short-term liquidity shortfalls, as the day-to-day cycle has majorly contracted. The unexpected and the novel events surrounding the pandemic took a toll on the health of equity markets. Stock markets around the world have posted almost lost 40% of its market cap. For instance, if we're going to talk about Dow and S&P, it lost more than 20 and 23% respectively after the Q1 2020. Market volatility was apparent even in developed market, in all markets. This in turn has led to a reduction in investor demand to invest in most companies' share. The situation in Egypt was not different. The Egyptian stock market saw a sharp decline, where it lost 32% by the end of Q1 2020 before recovering, and thanks to the measures undertaken by the central bank and the government to support the stock market and the economy at large. Despite the disruptions in the global market, the IPO market witnessed a strong rebound in Q3 and Q4, where the total number of IPOs during the year reached more than 1,400 IPOs, raising more than $300 billion, as opposed to 1,000 IPOs, raising a total of $200 billion in 2019. The major sectors contributing to stock markets listing in 2020 was basically technology, e-commerce, and healthcare companies. I believe that these sectors are expected to remain attractive for IPO investors in 2021 and going forward. This also implies on the Middle East and the African markets. If we give an example for Fawry, which is an Egyptian leading payment company, its market cap has increased from 6 billion in last year to reach more than 32 billion in March 21. Also, Naspers, a South African consumer internet company, market cap increased from 72 billion last year to reach 100 billion during the recent days. We expect that the global recovery is expected to take place in 2021 due to the rollout of COVID-19 vaccine measures and the expected relaxation of lockdown. We also have a positive impact on the IPO market and the liquidity market at large.
Thank you, Tariq. Thank you. Greg, you have anything to add when it comes to this traditional model that is evolving post-COVID-19?
Fadi, just to add that, having worked on a number of these transactions, it's been very impressive, the flexibility of management teams, of the advisor groups, the regulators and exchanges to execute these transactions in a very difficult period. And as Naif talked about, the ability to flex and be able to monitor and track these processes virtually with a change almost overnight is something that has been very impressive in the region and around the world. And I would add to what Tariq said in terms of the Egyptian market in particular. There's been some positive news and sentiment over the last few days with new issuers pricing their offerings and also announcing a technical listing into the EGX for the first time for one issuer as well. So there have been some delays in terms of companies coming to market in Egypt for a variety of reasons, but it seems now that the pipeline is improving and that activity will increase during 21, in my opinion.
Thank you. Greg, do you know that few companies ever reach the size and scale necessary to successfully go public? My question is, what are the key success factors for IPOs typically when it comes to private companies?
Sure. I think, despite the pandemic and the strange times that we've found ourselves in over the last 12 months or so, the key success factors from an IPO perspective remain the same. EY do a lot of research in this area to track performance on pricing and performance of offerings around the world and in the region. Attractive pricing at the transaction is one of the most important key success factors. A compelling equity story in every case is critical to the success of any transaction. Confidence in the management team and preparation of the management team in order to be able to execute an IPO process whilst also keeping their eye on what is most important, which is the current trading of the business that they're looking to bring to market. Right timing. There are only a handful of, let's say, IPO windows throughout the year driven by timing of financial information, driven by holiday periods in the region and around the world. So making sure that you time a transaction correctly, as well as making sure that you're aligned with a regulator review process is absolutely fundamental. And then I think next on the list for me would be, the readiness to provide transparency and improve and show good corporate governance within a business. And depending on the size and the nature of the organization that's planning to come to market, there's often quite a lot of work to do in terms of IPO readiness and preparation. So just making sure that that process is well managed and is started within sufficient time to be able to achieve the proposed IPO window is fundamental. And making sure you've got the right resources, the right advisor team on board, these, in my mind, I mean, there are lots of success factors for IPOs, and clearly it depends on specific circumstances, but those would be the key areas that I would focus on.
Where do you see the biggest challenges from a financial reporting perspective when it comes to a company planning for an IPO?
So this is often an area where, you know, companies need to evolve pretty significantly in advance of going public. So, you know, moving from producing financial statements once a year to producing quarterly information that needs to be shared with the market and the various stakeholders. In addition to that, it's about timing. So being able to produce that information on a timely and accurate basis for the various stakeholders is important, and that often involves significant work from a systems perspective, from a capabilities perspective, because companies who are private, you know, they don't have the same demands in terms of the requirements for financial reporting. So this is one area where we as an advisor spend a lot of time focusing, and it's not just about timeliness and accuracy, it's also about the quality of that information. And ultimately that information that's being produced is used by senior management to make decisions within the business. So making sure that you're carefully tracking appropriate KPIs, making sure you've got information from around the business, looking at financial as well as non-financial information is critical for senior management teams in preparation for going public.
What about tax? Is this something company needs to worry about it in the run up to IPO execution?
Well, I think with all transactions, you know, one point that is important is that there can be no black marks on a company's record when you're coming to market. So anything in relation to, you know, non-payment of taxes, disputes with any authorities, all of this needs to be tidied up in advance of any offering. And making sure that you've got the right processes, procedures in place to be able to file and report taxes is clearly important. One other area I think on the tax side is that sometimes, depending on the structure, the legal structure of an organization, there is some, you know, some restructuring, some work to be done in terms of structuring from a tax perspective, which can optimize an IPO process. It's certainly one of the things that companies should consider as they get ready.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Greg. Tarek, what is your opinion about the state-owned companies? Anything to add here?
Yes, I think that maybe if we're going to talk about state-owned companies going for an IPO, I think we have to apply maybe the same procedures and mechanisms that maybe Greg covered a while ago. But basically, I would like to emphasize here on two important aspects when a state-owned company go public. I believe that corporate governance is a key aspect here in terms of a success of an IPO. And we are talking about governance here. I think it comes from the top of the institution, which is the composition of the board of directors. I think this is very key in order to ensure strategy implementation and oversight. I think this is a very key aspect, and maybe we have undergone this experience since the appointment of the new board of Bank Ducaire 3 years back. We were very conscious about this point, and we have basically have 9 board members. The majority of the members are non-executive independent directors. We have 6 non-executive independent directors, out of which only 1 represent the principal owner, which is the state at the end of the day, while the rest of the members are either executive managers or the chairman and the 2 deputies, and the rest of the board are non-executive and independent. So I think this is a very key point, and not only the independency, it's not only important, but the composition of the board also is a very important aspect, where we have to appoint to this board subject matter experts in many fields that could serve the implementation of the company strategy. For us as Bank Decair, we have a very diversified and mixed board of directors. They are not only specialized in the banking industry, but we have the technology, the digital people, people coming from the SME, the FMCG's business, and many other business. So I think it's very key in order to ensure that the governance structure within the institution, it's in the right manner, in order to enable to cascade all the governance aspect concerning control environment, risk management procedure and policies to lower levels within the institution. Another important aspect for a state-owned IPO, I believe it's the buy-in, of the employees within the institution, because, it is very familiar in our region that the change or the majority of the masses resist to any change. When you go public, it's not the ownership of the state. Lots of debate here takes place. So in order to ensure a smooth operations of business, you have to ensure that there are very strong buy-in within the overall or the majority of the employees within the institution. And this, I think the key aspect here is the internal communication is very important to ensure that the IPO is in favor of the employees and in favor of the institution itself. And I think bundling this with with some programs like the ESOP schemes or so could help a lot in concluding a successful IPO for a state-owned company.
Thank you, Tariq. Thank you. Naif, are family businesses more enthusiastic with the idea of going public?
So we have two ways of probably addressing this question. One is through a read across from the pipeline, and I think that's very positive. We can see a lot of family businesses involved in the pipeline. Another thing that we've touched ourselves in a direct matter is we've seen more than 3,000 companies over the last 3 years. We've sat with them. The momentum and the opinion is definitely changing by the minute. We can definitely, we're starting to reap the benefits and reap the fruits of all the plants, all the seeds planted over the last 2 to 3 years. So in short, yes, I think family businesses are definitely taking a step or two towards, closer towards an IPO, at least here in the Kingdom of Saudi.
Thank you, Naya. Thank you. Greg, another question, please. Will a company preparing for an IPO need new functions within the business to be able to act as a public company, do you think?
Thanks, Fadi. I mean, it depends is the honest answer in terms of their current state of readiness. But I think there are certain functions that will absolutely need to be established and most likely didn't previously exist. And the most obvious one, I think, is a function that looks at investor relations and communications. Typically, private companies don't have very advanced, sophisticated corp comms departments. And so finding the right resources, building the right strategy around communications and your investor relations interaction is key. But there may be other areas that also need to be enhanced or perhaps even put in place. So for example, if there was no internal audit department historically, that's something that should be considered in advance of the IPO. Similarly, from a risk management perspective, depending on the current state of readiness of the organization. So, you have to look at each individual situation separately and assess the company's readiness But I think it's fair to say that companies will need to enhance and perhaps introduce new functions as well as they plan to go public.
And how long does the process usually take, and who typically project manages the process? How do company management teams keep their focus on running the business?
How long does the process take is an interesting question. I think at the beginning of a process, it depends on who you ask actually, but it can take anything from 6 to 9 months to 4 or 5 years, depending on the company's readiness to go public. Making sure that all of the key success factors that I previously discussed, and making sure that adequate preparation and readiness assessment is done in good time will help to improve the efficiency of the process. Bringing on the right advisors at the right time will help to improve the efficiency of the process. But it's fair to say that there is a significant amount of effort involved to transact, to complete an IPO. And I think it's also worth noting that a lot of those preparations and that readiness activity can be of huge benefit to the organization, regardless whether the company goes public or not, or pursues another track. In terms of the improvements around transparency, governance, controls, reporting, there's a lot of good business sense in getting ready for a future transaction. But perhaps I'd ask Wasim and Naif as well that their experience in terms of the length of time that it takes, and I know it depends as well on the number of companies coming through the pipeline in different geographies and what the regulators can deal with.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Greg. Just echoing what you have mentioned, Fadi and audience, if you look at the 12 IPOs that were completed between 2018 and year-to-date 2021, out of the 12 transactions that have taken place, with the exception of Saudi Aramco, Amlak, and Lijam, the rest of the IPOs were actually for family-owned companies. So when you compare the ratio of those companies that have gone public to the early 2000s, when we had the boom of certain companies going public from the banking sector and other large state or pension or sovereign wealth fund owned companies, seeing that trend in family businesses taking their companies public is an indication of several things. Number one, a lot of those companies are now very comfortable in terms of meeting disclosure requirements, installing the right governance practices, as well as Greg mentioned, the activating the investor relations function, which brings issuers and the capital markets much closer together. Number two, we have also seen family-owned companies becoming a bit more proactive compared to a couple of decades ago in terms of preparing themselves from a governance, readiness, financial reporting capabilities aspects in order for them to expedite and accelerate the listing process when they appoint financial advisors and consultants. So all in all, what I would like to maybe emphasize here is that the level of depth that those family-owned companies have demonstrated over the years demonstrates to the market that, number one, we have a very strong private sector, and that is a reflection of the strong economy that we have on the ground in the kingdom. Number two, most of these companies have become very mature in understanding disclosure and governance requirements. And then number three, we're seeing the investors on the buy side acknowledging these efforts and then helping those transactions proceed with very strong, robust demand and coverage, and even post-listing performance. Naif, I'd like to pass it to you, see if you have any views on that.
When it comes to timeline, I'm quite biased. I think we are probably an entity that's judged by how quick we move in terms of a company filing for an IPO and being part of the exchange, being a traded security. But we definitely have seen tremendous improvements in how the process is being dealt with, whether by the exchange or the CMA. And I don't think we're no longer at one stage. Probably the exchange and the CMA were a pain point. I would say in the last 5 years, things have dramatically changed. And probably Wasim and Greg can tell you of a lot of backs and forths and a lot of constructive discussions that have taken place in the last IPOs over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. Things have changed, Fadi, on the positive side, at least from my opinion, but my opinion is very biased.
Thank you. Naif, what about SPACs? Are they on the radar for the moment? Maybe in Saudi Arabia?
That's a very interesting question. We're definitely following the SPAC boom that's taking place in North America, specifically, and we're following it very closely. What I can say is the CMA and the exchange are definitely looking at any product or any regulatory change that serves a positive purpose for various market participants. We're not in a position where we can say SPACs are right around the corner. I think we're still a distance from that. We're a little bit more focused on another hot topic, which is direct listings. I think we're pioneers when it comes to that. We've successfully done that in the Moon. Now the next step is to take it towards the main market, and that's, I'd say, that's something that's more feasible at this stage and at this time.
Thank you, Naif. Tarek, excuse me. Do you have any key message that you would like to share with us at the end of the session? You are on mute, Tarek.
Okay, so I think I am very optimistic about the recovery. Hopefully in 2021, we're going to see more IPOs taking place. But maybe the message that I want to convey here, that the commitment for doing the business is very important when it comes to an institution opting to go to the IPO market. I think this is very key. Commitment from all stakeholders. It's not only the institution, but also all the regulators, the participants in the IPO at large. I think it's very important to exhibit this sort of commitment in order to ensure a successful IPO. Maybe what we can say here, for us, we had undergone a very good experience last year when we were about to launch our IPO. It took us door to door 6 months in order to come up with this IPO, but unfortunately it didn't happen. We were about to do our early look meetings, but it was not materialized at the end of the day. But the commitment here was very strong from all the stakeholders that were taking care of this transaction, of this deal.
Thank you, Tarek. Greg, do you have any recommendation, any message you would like to share at the end of the session?
I think, Fadi, my primary recommendation, having been through this process, as some of my fellow panelists have been through, I think everybody would agree that preparation, planning, and thinking about the various challenges of taking a company public as early as possible is really the key for the success of any transaction. So that readiness exercise, I think, is fundamental to make sure that you've seen where the gaps are and you can work as a company on filling them, so you can hit those IPO windows in the future.
Thank you, Greg. Wasim, would like to add anything?
Thank you, Fadi. I think the few points that I would like to share is that with the 2.5 trillion in market cap, ranking 10th or 11th globally, we already have what we call the global champion in the Saudi Stock Exchange, Tadawul. And that has continuously demonstrated innovation and involvement in terms of practices, regulations, framework, and all of the other supporting services. I would also encourage the audience to maybe have a look at the financial sector development program that has been inaugurated by the Kingdom in the recent past, that could also encourage other issuers and investors from all around the Arab world and beyond to benefit from the initiatives that we have launched here on the ground. And one final key takeaway is that especially for issuers, is that an IPO is a journey and it starts after listing. It does not end with a listing. So demonstrating that, the robust equity stories, making sure that it is a partnership rather than just a step-by-step process, bringing in the investors closer to you, working very closely with the regulators and the exchange, would ensure that any company or issuer post-listing would continue to demonstrate that performance in the secondary market.
Thank you, Wasim. Naif, would you like to conclude?
Sure. Thank you very much, Fadi, and for the rest of the panelists for such a fantastic set of answers to the great questions you've posed. I'll keep it very simple. I would say just join us at the Saudi Stock Exchange, list on the Saudi Stock Exchange, be part of one of the largest capital markets in the world. If you're pondering that decision, give us a call and we'll be more than happy to take you through the process and take you through what's necessary to be part of an evolving stock exchange.
Thank you. So at the end of this panel discussion, I would like to express my deep appreciation and thanks to you, Tariq, Greg, Naif, and Wasim, for your valuable participation, and may God bless you with all the success, prosperity, and progress. Thank you again, and have a nice evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Fadi.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Fadi.
Bye. Thank you.